Paul, an elderly gentleman, was turned away at the reception of a five-star hotel because his clothes and appearance didn't match those of the other guests. But when he finally revealed his identity, no one could believe the mistake that had been made. They say the way we treat people, especially those we don't know, is the key to understanding our true nature and whether we are as just and intelligent as we think we are. In today's touching story, we'll learn about Paul and how being kicked out of a hotel reminded him of the most important things about our relationships and communication with people. The elderly man, tired and worn out, stopped on the sidewalk and looked at the five-star hotel across the street. He was wearing simple clothes and a pair of shoes that were a bit worn out from so much use. The man passed through the hotel's automatic door and entered the lobby. The space was immaculate. Modern decor, cushioned seating, and a gleaming floor that reflected the light coming through the large windows. At the reception stood a well-dressed woman, with impeccable posture and light makeup, sporting a pair of heels that looked expensive. When the man in the plain clothes and worn shoes stopped near her, the well-dressed woman looked him up and down. It took her less than 2 seconds to judge that this man was neither a guest nor a customer. She assumed he was someone needing some information and prayed he wasn't a homeless person who had come in to disturb the guests. It seemed as though at any moment, the man's shoe might give out. To make matters worse, he had 2 sweat stains under his arms and an unshaven beard that gave him an even older and more disheveled appearance. He approached the well-dressed receptionist, and she grew tense, imagining what would happen next. The old man greeted her and said he needed a room for that day. As he said this, he pulled his wallet from his pocket. It was an old wallet too, and though it had many large bills inside, she only saw a credit card and what appeared to be a series of documents, nothing that indicated he was like most guests of a five-star hotel. The woman signaled for him not to bother looking for money, a card, or anything else in his wallet, as there were no rooms available that day. "All our rooms are booked," she said. The old man put away his wallet and looked intently at the receptionist, whose name tag read Rachel. He said, "Look, Rachel, I've been through a lot to get here. I can't go around the city looking for a room, and I think you have at least a dozen vacancies." Behind Rachel was a row of access cards with room numbers beside them, likely indicating that those rooms hadn't been taken yet. Cornered, the receptionist thought it best to be honest with the man and calmly explained the situation. "Sir, I understand. This is a luxury hotel that caters to an upper-class clientele who usually arrive here by car or executive taxi, not on foot. This isn't a place everyone can afford. We have a reputation in the city and can't risk it by giving one of our vacant rooms to someone who isn't of the same social level as the rest of our guests. You understand, don't you?" The old man listened patiently to everything she said, but his gaze seemed increasingly weary and disheartened with each sentence. He then said that Rachel was mistaken and that all he wanted was a room in that hotel, as he hadn't rested in a long time. It could even be the simplest room, with the worst view. "It doesn't matter," he said. But Rachel simply replied that that's not how things worked there. The old man then asked to speak to management, but instead, the hotel supervisor, Bruce, appeared. He introduced himself without extending his hand to the man. Rachel quickly explained the situation, and Bruce never broke eye contact with the man, maintaining a rigid posture. He sided with the receptionist and told the old man that a few blocks away there was a less luxurious hotel where he could be accommodated. But the man refused to walk in the direction indicated by the supervisor. So, Bruce called in the security guard, who grabbed the old man and dragged him to the entrance. When they were halfway there, the supervisor asked the guard to stop. The old man thought that these people had finally realized the mistake they were making, but that wasn't the case. The supervisor told the guard to take him out through the service entrance, as it wouldn't look good to have that scene at the hotel's main entrance. The security guard, a huge man, led the old man down a corridor to the back of the hotel without any trouble. The old man protested, saying they were all making a mistake and that he wanted to speak to management. The guard was just following orders from the supervisor. When they reached the service area, they ran into Natalie, who was operating the hotel's laundry machines. Seeing the large guard using so much force against an elderly man, she told him to stop. The guard respected Natalie and released the man. "Why is he being taken out through the back?" she asked. Is this how we treat people now in this company? The guard said he was just following orders, and that if she didn't like it, she should complain to the supervisors. Natalie said the service entrance was her responsibility and that she would handle the rest. The guard left, saying the old man was her responsibility now, and she could deal with it. Natalie approached the man, introduced herself, and asked his name. "You can call me Paul," he replied, closing his eyes and placing his hand on his head. Natalie promptly took a white pill from her pocket and offered it to him. "Is your head hurting?" she asked. "Take this, dear. You'll feel better." The old man thanked her, and she told him her shift had ended. She was now waiting for her husband to come pick her up. Meanwhile, a pair of housekeepers came into the service area and saw Natalie with a man who, besides being elderly, dressed simply, and wearing worn-out shoes, was now rumpled and disheveled. They wasted no time teasing their colleague, saying they knew her husband wasn't the most capable man in the world, but they would swap him for the man standing there. In a work environment, it was too much. "You two are so funny," Natalie replied. Paul wasn't offended and even found the housekeeper's boldness amusing. But he also noticed that Natalie was embarrassed. The housekeepers left, laughing. Paul wanted to know what the comment about her husband not being a special person was all about. Natalie took a deep breath and began to tell her story. Her husband, Christian, was now physically disabled after losing his leg in a car accident. The driver ran a red light and hit Christian as he crossed the street, smashing his leg. He was attended by an emergency service and urgently taken to the operating room. The doctors tried, but his leg couldn't be saved and was amputated. Of course, Christian wasn't happy with the outcome of the accident, but he didn't despair. Natalie said that despite everything, he was grateful to have survived and believed he still had a promising future. Christian's youth had been difficult. He never knew his father, and his mother died of cancer when he was a teenager. He spent a long time living in a shelter, finished school, and started working. He met Natalie, and with difficulty, they pooled their monthly incomes to live together in a very small and simple house on the outskirts of the city. They didn't have children. Apart from that modest residence, the couple's only valuable possession was a small car they had bought after 4 years of saving and sacrifice. Christian used the car to work as a rideshare driver and was likely on his way to pick up his wife from work. Paul accompanied Natalie to the service area exit, where the security guard had taken him out minutes earlier. Natalie invited him to meet her husband and see their home. Paul hadn't expected that and was initially taken aback. He was exhausted and hadn't resolved the situation at the hotel yet, but he thought it might be good to get to know the couple better and then return. When Christian arrived, the three of them got into the car and headed to the house on the outskirts of the city. Natalie's husband, though a nice guy who knew how to hold a conversation, didn't find the sudden friendship between Paul and his wife strange. To allow Christian to drive, the car was adapted for his physical disability. During the entire journey, Christian never once complained about life, maintaining a light-hearted attitude. At most, he mentioned having back pain but didn't know if it was because of the accident or because he spent all day sitting while driving. "I think I need to walk more," he said, joking. Paul laughed. Paul realized he hadn't felt so at ease with anyone in years. He was able to rest at Natalie and Christian's home without having to stop talking with the two of them. The hours passed, and Natalie thought that perhaps this elderly man had nowhere to go and invited him to stay the night. Paul accepted and slept on the old sofa in the living room. The next day, Paul got up and tried to fix his hair and shirt with his hands, refusing Natalie's offer to iron his clothes. Paul only asked that Christian take him back to the hotel since Natalie would be heading there as well. The two of them entered through the service area. Natalie didn't question the man's actions but feared he might be expelled again or, worse, that something else might happen. Jack Bruce, the supervisor, might want to call the police this time. Paul walked through the hotel's back corridors and, upon arriving there, stood in a corner while Rachel was talking to a woman in a suit. Her name tag said she was Layla, the hotel manager. Paul approached, and Rachel felt a chill in her stomach when she saw him at the reception again. She excused herself from the manager and went towards him, already saying that he had to leave. Seeing the receptionist's behavior, Layla turned pale. Paul ignored Rachel and began speaking directly to the manager. "Layla, how are you running things around here? I was about to give you a promotion and put you in charge of more hotels in our chain, but it seems these people here have no idea who they work for." Layla started apologizing to Paul. When Rachel finally realized she was standing in front of the hotel's owner, she begged for forgiveness, saying she didn't recognize him dressed that way. Paul said he had tried to identify himself, that he had pulled out his wallet to show his documents to Rachel, but the receptionist hadn't even let him introduce himself. He was dressed that way because once a month, he volunteered at the local animal shelter. He had spent a long time organizing things at the shelter and didn't realize he was without a phone to call a car to take him home. So, he decided to go to one of his nearby hotels. But to Paul, all of that was secondary. He said the way he was treated was unacceptable, not because he was the owner of the place, but because that treatment was cruel, with no consideration for human dignity. Paul said he would have to review the roles of all the employees in that hotel and couldn't guarantee that the manager, supervisor, receptionist, and security guard would keep their jobs. However, he made it clear that Natalie, the service area supervisor, had shown much more tact in handling the situation and that, despite the stress caused by the incident, she was the only person he trusted and who would remain at the hotel. Rachel pleaded not to be fired, saying she was willing to change. Paul then said that she could stay, but she would have to do a 1-month internship in the hotel's service area, where she wouldn't work in nice clothes, jewelry, high heels, or makeup. Rachel said she wouldn't do it, that she wouldn't participate in such a punishment, as she would feel humiliated and degraded. "It's unacceptable," she said. Paul looked at her with pity, placed his hands on her shoulders, and said calmly, "You mean to say that you think being a cook, cleaner, or housekeeper is humiliating? You think those people aren't up to your standards? Well, know that they are very dignified, and the only unacceptable thing here is your lack of humility." The next day, a man in a suit arrived at Natalie and Christian's house in the late afternoon. He introduced himself and said he handled matters for Mr. Paul. By this time, Natalie already knew that the old man she had met the day before was actually her boss at the hotel and couldn't believe what was happening. Even so, the man in the suit was there to deliver good news. Christian would receive a prosthetic leg and physical therapy treatment for his pain. They would also get a better and more spacious house in another part of the city, closer to the commercial area. In addition, if Natalie agreed, they would pay for an intensive management course to prepare her for a higher-level position at the hotel. The following morning, Natalie and Christian were enjoying a rare moment of tranquility in their small, cozy home. The modest house, located on the outskirts of the city, was a reflection of the simple and humble life they led. The walls, painted in soft colors, were decorated with a few paintings that Natalie had lovingly chosen over the years. Small mementos of a life full of struggles, but also of much love and companionship. Christian was sitting in a worn armchair, a piece of furniture that had been purchased many years ago at a clearance sale. Despite the simplicity of the environment, he felt at peace, holding a cup of hot coffee in his hands while looking out the window, contemplating the day that was beginning. Natalie, always attentive to her husband's needs, was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. The aroma of toasted bread and fresh coffee spread throughout the house, bringing a sense of comfort that seemed to be the only constant in their lives. She had a habit of preparing simple yet flavorful meals, a skill she had developed over the years to take care of Christian, especially after the accident that had left him with an amputated leg. Despite the difficulties, Natalie always found a way to make the best of what little they had, never complaining and always keeping a smile on her face. Suddenly, the sound of the doorbell broke the serene silence of that morning. Natalie, with flowers still on her hands, quickly wiped them on a cloth and went to answer the door. They weren't expecting anyone, which made her think it could be a neighbor in need of help, or perhaps someone delivering something by mistake. When she opened the door, Natalie was surprised by an elegant man, dressed in an impeccable suit. His demeanor commanded respect, and he held a black leather briefcase that complemented his sophisticated appearance. The man smiled warmly and introduced himself as a representative of Mr. Paul. Christian, upon hearing the voice of a stranger, got up from the armchair with some difficulty and approached the door, curious to know who the unexpected visitor was. The man in the suit politely entered the small living room, analyzing the simple yet welcoming environment. He could see that this house, despite its modesty, was a home built with love and dedication. Natalie, still surprised by the presence of the stranger, invited him to sit in one of the wooden chairs they had in the living room, while Christian, with the help of his crutch, settled back into the armchair. The man began to speak, with a calm and firm voice, explaining that he was there on behalf of Paul, the man they had helped the day before. Natalie and Christian exchanged confused glances, trying to understand what such a distinguished man had to tell them. He continued, revealing that Paul had been deeply moved by the generosity and kindness with which they had treated a complete stranger, not knowing that he was, in fact, the owner of the luxurious hotel where Natalie worked. The man explained that, in recognition of such a rare and precious gesture, Paul had decided to reward them in a significant way. Christian listened attentively as the man described the wonderful surprises that were in store for them. First, he mentioned that Paul had arranged for a state-of-the-art prosthetic leg for Christian. It wasn't just any prosthetic. It was one of the most advanced on the market, custom-made to provide maximum comfort and mobility. Additionally, the man assured them that Christian would receive specialized medical treatment and regular physical therapy, which would alleviate the pain he still felt and help him regain a significant portion of his quality of life. Christian, who had learned to live with the limitations imposed by the accident, felt a mix of relief and gratitude. For so long, he had endured the pain in silence, never imagining that one day he would have access to such advanced treatment. Natalie, with tears welling up in her eyes, listened in silence as the man continued. He revealed that Paul had also decided to provide the couple with a new house, much more spacious and located in a better area of the city, closer to the commercial center and the amenities they needed. This house would be a true home, with enough space for them to live more comfortably and with dignity. The news left Natalie almost speechless. She had always known that the house they lived in was small, and that, over the years, Christian's needs would require a more accessible space, but she had never imagined that something like this could happen. The man, noticing the couple's emotion, made a brief pause before delivering the final news. He informed Natalie that Paul considered her an exemplary employee and that, as recognition for her dedication and the generous heart she had shown, she would be promoted to a higher position at the hotel. To ensure she was prepared for the new responsibilities, Paul would provide an intensive management course where Natalie would learn everything she needed to confidently assume her new role. Natalie, who had always given her best at work, felt a wave of pride and gratitude. She never expected her kindness to be recognized in this way, much less rewarded with a promotion that could transform her and Christian's lives. As the man in the suit detailed each of these incredible pieces of news, Natalie and Christian could hardly believe what they were hearing. It was as if all the sacrifices and difficulties they had faced over the years were being rewarded all at once. The feeling of surprise soon gave way to deep gratitude, not just for Paul, but for a life that suddenly seemed more generous and full of possibilities. They had never imagined that a simple act of kindness, something they had done without expecting anything in return, could have such a significant impact. The man in the suit, sensing how much these news meant to the couple, smiled gently and, before taking his leave, made it clear that the world needed more people like Natalie and Christian, who, with their generosity, had touched Paul's heart in a way he would never forget. When the man left, leaving Natalie and Christian alone in the small living room, the couple embraced, still processing all the changes that were about to take place in their lives. They knew that, regardless of anything, that day would mark the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where kindness, respect, and love would continue to be the pillars of their lives. And above all, they had learned that even in a world that can seem cold and indifferent, simple and genuine gestures still have the power to transform lives. If you enjoyed this video, please show your support by leaving a like. This next video will probably move you as well. Enjoy, and see you next time.